Hey everybody, this is Marcus of Blind Guardian, and you're watching Richard the Metal Fan.
What's up, guys? Episode 245 of Richard Metal Fan Interviews, calling from Zoom, and I have the honor and the privilege to speak with Marcus from the legendary Blind Guardian. How are you doing today, man? Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
Any anytime, man, anytime. So let's just get right into this because this year does mark 40 years since the formation of Blind Guardian. Got to think about it, Marcus. 40 years of Blind Guardian as a band. Like, did you think that you guys would be around for 40 years?
Um, I didn't even know if you would still be alive. I mean, it's when you start a band as teenagers, as kids, obviously you don't think about a time when you're in the middle of your 50s, and so we had no clue how long our career would last, but we always took it very serious, and we wanted to become a lasting and successful band, and we worked for that. But obviously, in this business, you have absolutely zero guarantees for anything. You can be the major band tomorrow, and you can be gone the day after. But yeah, 40 years later, we're still here. We're on tour. We're having fun. We're enjoying our lives. So I guess we're good.
Yeah, because I know originally like you guys were called Lucifer's Heritage, but I thought it was like a hell of a name, original name. But then apparently your demos were like mistakenly put in with black metal albums. So to avoid the accusations of Satanism or something, you decided to change the name to Blind Guardian. So how did the name come to be of Blind Guardian? I know it's the most typical interview question ever.
Well, as you pointed out, Lucifer's Heritage, many people heard the name and they didn't even want to listen to the music because they thought we were doing black metal, which we never did, even though I like black metal a lot. But obviously, that was not the type of music that we were playing, so we thought we needed a different name. And we actually changed the name during the recordings of Battalions of Fear of the album. So we were sitting in the studio kitchen and everybody had a blank piece of paper in front of him, and we were just brainstorming and just writing down anything that came to our minds. And we already had the song Guardian of the Blind. And obviously, Blind Guardian was born from that song title. I think it was Hansi's idea. Don't remember, but I think it was him. And actually, before we changed the name to Blind Guardian, we had a different name for about 10 days or 2 weeks maximum. We were called Battery, inspired by a certain Metallica song.
I
And
never knew
yeah,
that.
yeah, it's good that not too many people know about that because it was a stupid name, at least as a band name. And our friends were all like, "Battery? You're sure about that?" And we're like, maybe we're not so sure about that. And so it turned into Blind Guardian, and yeah, it was a good choice. We're still happy with that name, and yeah, I
Yeah.
think much better than Battery.
Yeah. But tell me about the thought process going into making Battalions of Fear because I thought this was a really great debut. So what was the thought process going into making the debut Blind Guardian full-length album?
I mean, I think the thought process for any debut album is rather simple because normally you just record the songs that you already have. It's not that we had to sit down and once we were signed to a record label, all the songs were there, or most of the songs were there at least, because we did two demos before that, and most of the songs of Bajan Sophia have been on one of those two demo tapes, so we had them. So the thought process was, let's go into the studio and do a proper recording. And it was much more of a learning process for us than thought process or anything, because we've been into demo studios, but we've never properly recorded an album with a producer and everything. So we learned a lot in those early days. We still learn a lot in the studio today because you can always learn something new. But playing tight together and paying attention to things, and we were just a bunch of kids let loose in the studio. And Kalle, the producer of our early albums, he was like, "No, you can't do this. You have to pay attention to this and that and blah blah." So we learned a lot there, and I think we improved as a band because of those lessons that we learned.
And
So
what
it
was
was a
like,
very valuable time for us.
yeah, and what was like the touring like for Battalions of Fear? Did you play outside of Germany for the first time, or is it still local?
That was local. I think we played a tour with our label mates. So we were the first band to be signed by No Remorse Records back then, and the second band on the label were friends of ours called Grinder, a band from the Frankfurt area, and we toured together. So they released their album like a couple of months after we put out Battalions. So No Remorse was sending us on tour together. We toured for like 10 days, something like that. I think it was only Germany, might have been Switzerland or Austria one show, but I think it was just Germany. But we had a nightliner, we shared a nightliner, so we felt great. You know, we were on tour, and obviously that's, you know, when you start a band, that's what you dream about. You know, hit the road, play live in different cities outside your hometown, and obviously it was not international touring yet, but we were a small band. We had to grow. And we took it step by step. And I think that that is also a good thing because if you take everything step by step and you constantly grow, but you know you're not an overnight huge success or anything, you have to keep in mind we were kids, and I don't know how our brains would have handled a huge overnight success. You know, you might freak and become an arrogant idiot. I don't know.
Yeah.
Luckily, that was never the problem for us. We're pretty down to earth people, I guess, and it just worked very fine for us.
Yeah, and this year also is 35 years of your second album, Follow the Blind, which I thought was a really good
Yeah.
album because usually with the debut you have your entire life to write and there's a lot of hype with that. When it came to making Follow the Blind, you just felt pressure to follow up Battalions of Fear?
Uh, there's always a certain pressure involved because obviously you want to top what you did before. You want to do something that's even better, whatever that means. Plus, back in the day, there was not the defined Blind Guardian style yet. Obviously, we had our influences, and you could hear the influences in the music as it is with any starting band, you know. So we were still trying to find our own style, and we were experimenting with things. I mean, Follow the Blind was more aggressive than Battalions. It was a bit more thrashier. We were listening to a lot of thrash bands back in the day, and that obviously had an influence on us as well. And we just tried to take the next step. You know, we tried to improve on the production, on songwriting, on our playing capabilities. And for us, it was just the next logical step. But yeah, pressure is always involved because you want to put out something good, something quality.
Yeah, and Valhalla definitely is like one of my favorite Blind Guardian songs. Like I consider it kind of like you guys is like master of puppets. Like if you have to play it live at every show, otherwise if you don't, people will riot.
Let me tell you something. Valhalla was a last minute song. It was not meant to be there at all. We
Really?
entered the studio, started recording, and we were told we're one song short because, you know, on back then it was vinyl still. So you needed like, what was it, 36 minutes to fill a vinyl album without sound going going down. And we were missing those last 5 minutes or something. So we were told, write another song. And we're like, "Yeah, but we don't have another song." So we sat down and we came up with Valhalla. And the funny thing is, we didn't even really like it. So
Really?
if it would have been, yes, if it would have been our decision back then, if there wouldn't be 5 minutes missing to fill an album, Valhalla would not have been on Follow the Blind.
Wow.
But thank God it ended up on the album. And I think we played it in most shows since we released the album. There were a couple of shows where we didn't play it, but yeah, I mean, obviously it became one of the classic Blind Guardian songs, and people go nuts when we play it. And
Yeah.
it's a nice thing to see that.
Yeah. Next up, Tales from the Twilight World. I thought this was a great follow-up to Follow the Blind. So what was it like going from this to this?
Um, Tales was a big step for us. First of all, we had much longer production time. I think Battalions was recorded and mixed in 3 weeks, something like that, and Follow the Blind was 4 weeks. And as far as I remember, Tales was like 3 months, was 2 months, something like this. Definitely longer. It was in a different studio. It was still the same producer, Kalle Trapp, but he built a new studio near Hamburg. So we went there, recorded there, and I think it was a very important album for us because on that album we found our own style. You know, we with the money that we earned from the first two albums, we invested everything back into the band. You know, we bought recording equipment, we bought those Fostex tape recorders, tape machines, and everything. And we used that studio setup that we suddenly owned also for songwriting, so we could experiment on a lot of things that normally, if you're just jamming in a rehearsal room, you can't really try. You know, we experimented with the choir arrangements and with lots of guitar layers. While if you want to try something like this in the rehearsal room, there's just Andre and me on guitar, so we can only play two guitars at the same time. With the studio equipment that we suddenly owned, we could layer whatever, you know, we could try all those things. And this is how we found our style, our voice in music. And the result is Tales from the Twilight World.
Yeah.
Which was a major step for us. You know, it was suddenly we became aware of fans on the other side of the planet. You know, we got letters from Japan and stuff, which completely freaked us out because, you know, we were still a young band from Germany, and suddenly people from Japan write letters to you and tell you that they love your band and that you're great and whatever. And you're like, whoa, something is happening.
Yeah.
And we also toured more, obviously. We toured outside Germany for the first time. I think I'm not sure if we toured outside Germany with Follow the Blind, but with Tales, we definitely did this.
Did you do the US at the same time too?
No, we didn't do the US. We came to the US rather late. The problem was that the label in the US didn't want to release our albums for whatever reason. I can't explain you why. So the first album that was officially released in the US, I think, was A Night at the Opera, so in 2002.
Yeah.
And that was actually also the first time we toured in the US.
Yeah.
So we came there rather late, but yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, but I liked how your first three albums are released like a year after year after year after the other. Were we all like kind of like just like on that grind?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you know, I mean, obviously, as I was saying, for Battalions of Fear, we toured like a week or 10 days, and for Follow the Blind, I think we didn't even do a constant tour. We did lots of weekend shows, you know, where we play Friday, Saturday, Sunday somewhere, and then next weekend you play 3 gigs somewhere else and stuff like that. Yeah. So we had lots of time to work on new songs, obviously. I mean, today, if we release a new album, we're on the road for like 2 years. And we've always been a band that doesn't necessarily write new music on the road, because what we do on the road is we play the old songs. And if we would sit down now and try to compose something, it would most likely sound like the stuff that we're playing every night.
Yeah.
And since we don't want to repeat ourselves, we wait until the tour is done, empty our heads, and then start fresh.
Yeah. And then I guess, did you really want to take your time to hone in your craft for Somewhere Far Beyond? I love this album. This is probably like in my top 3 Blind Guardian albums.
Same for me. It's still a super special album for us. And it was the next major step. I mean, it was the first time we toured Japan. So, you know, that was completely mind blowing. You know, as I was saying before, we already had fan mail from Japan, but suddenly we were offered a tour. So, you know, we flew there and it was culture shock deluxe because everything was different. You know, we played in big theaters. We played the same arenas where Judas Priest recorded Unleashed in the East and where Made in Japan was done and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it was amazing, and obviously we used the chance to record Tokyo Tales, our first live album, and we have amazing memories. It was, I think, definitely the biggest step for us until then. The biggest step in our career.
Yeah.
Because suddenly we were an international band, famous band on the other side of the planet. So that felt really good.
Yeah. And next up, Imaginations from the Other Side. Probably also my second favorite Blind Guardian album. So what was the whole album like for this? Because I know next year will also be the 30-year anniversary of this. So is there a chance maybe you'll do a celebration of this somehow?
Well, we celebrated the 25th anniversary where we played the whole album in a row, and it was fun to do that. And it has a great flow, so you can play this album from A to Z, and it just works. And it was probably, again, until then, the biggest step for us. First of all, we started experimenting with more mid-tempo songs. Obviously not battalions, Somewhere Far Beyond and also Tales were very speed metal driven. So we started experimenting with different things, like songs like Bright Eyes, for example, or Imaginations, the title track itself. It's a different vibe. It still sounds obviously like Blind Guardian. And it was the first time that we worked with Flemming Rasmussen, obviously famous for his work with Blind Guardian, yeah, also with Metallica, sorry. And we went to Denmark, to Sweet Silence Studios, to record the album there. And I think that was one of the biggest steps for us to grow as musicians, because Flemming taught us so much. We became a much, much tighter band just by working with him, because we went to the studio and we played as we always played, and he was like, "Oh no, that's not tight enough, play it again." And we're like, "What do you mean? It was cool." And he was like, "No, that was not cool, play it again."
Yeah, can't half-ass
And
it.
yeah, and exactly. So he definitely lifted us on a different level. And it was the first time we did a proper European tour. I remember we played Italy and we played Greece and we played several countries that we haven't played before. So it was a big step for us again. We did many big steps in the 90s, I realize.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a really important album for us, because that put us on the map internationally, I would say. Obviously, Somewhere Far Beyond put us on the map in Japan, and that brought us a lot of reputation just for being a very successful band in Japan. But Imaginations put us on the map in the rest of the world as well, I would say.
Yeah. Then next up, Nightfall in Middle Earth. Probably, in my opinion, my favorite Blind Guardian album. So tell me about that, because I know last year was, of course, the 25th anniversary of this. So what are some of the certain memories that you have making Nightfall in Middle Earth?
It was the second album we again worked with Flemming. But we started recording in our own studio. So we decided to build a proper studio, just because renting a professional studio wherever on the planet is very expensive if you want to spend quite some time in there. So we recorded a lot of it at home in our own studio that we're still using till today. And at some point, Hansi suggested that he wanted to do a concept album.
Yeah,
And
based off Tolkien.
that was one of the two options. The other option was based on the Nibelungen Saga, German hero epos. And we were, in the beginning, we were not sure what he would go for. And obviously it became Tolkien. But yeah, I mean, doing a concept album means you have to pay attention to a lot of things that you're not bound to be focusing on if you just do a regular album. Because if for example, lyric-wise, you're dealing with a very heavy and sad topic in the story, then you can't play happy music to it. So it has to go together. So you have to pay attention to a lot of more details. Plus, at some point, we had the idea with all those interludes, this narrative sections and everything. So it was something completely different, something that we have never done before.
Flows in
But it was a lot
perfectly.
of it was fun for us. And I remember some people complained because they found it disturbing in between the songs. They only wanted the music. Others loved it. And it was what we wanted to do. And it definitely is it might be the most successful album we have done. It's definitely one of the most important ones we did. So yeah.
Yeah.
Very important
would you ever play
chapter.
this album in full?
I would like to it. I like the idea. We would have to work on that because there are a couple of songs that we never ever played live so far. So we would have to completely relearn them because, frankly speaking, we forgot how to play them since we never played them since we recorded them and stuff. So
Yeah.
we would have to invest some time, but it might be a fun thing.
Yeah. Then next up, Night at the Opera, probably in my opinion, the most underrated Blind Guardian album. Like, not a lot of people talk about this. How do you feel about this album?
I love it. I loved it back then when we did it. I still love it today. And the funny thing is, when it came out, it was the first time we were criticized for an album. There were people saying, no, that's too much. You overdid it. It's overproduced. It's too much going on, whatever, those type of things. And the funny thing is that the majority of the people that were of this opinion back then now say it's one of their favorite albums.
Really? It would have been like, well, it would
Yeah,
have been nice to hear it when it came out.
yeah. The thing is, I get it. It's constantly at a peak. It's definitely not easy listening music. And this morning I was talking to our keyboarder about this album, and it's not something that you can listen to, or at least I don't recommend listening to this album while doing something else. What I recommend is if you want to listen tonight at the opera, focus on the album because you will always discover new things, and it will always be a roller coaster ride. If you do something else that demands your focus and you listen to this album at the back, that wouldn't work for me either.
Yeah.
But I think back then when we put it out, people were just expecting something different. Maybe they were expecting Nightfall Part 2, which we were never interested in that because, we did Nightfall. Why repeat it? We already did this. We wanted to do something different. And obviously, A Night at the Opera is something very different. So I guess some people just were disappointed because they didn't get what they expected. But as I was saying, a lot of people now say, a lot of those people that didn't like it back then now say it's one of the best albums. So I guess it just took some time to sink in and learn to love it. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And then next up, A Twist of the Myth. I think this is another underrated album. I put it up there with a Night at the Opera. So what was the thought process going into making A Twist of the Myth?
I agree. I also think that this album is underrated. I think it was overshadowed by the fact that we had the first and only lineup change in the band when we changed drummers. So Toman left the band and Frederick came into the band. And I think it was kind of overshadowed by this. And again, we tried to do something not completely different. I mean, if you listen to the album, to any album, all of the stuff that we did sounds like Blind Guardian, but we, as I was saying before, we tried to not repeat ourselves. We tried to go somewhere else, try to incorporate different things that we didn't do so far to keep it interesting for ourselves and also for the fans. And again, I think some people expected something different. And with us, it's always expect the unexpected because everything else would be too obvious and too easy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still think this is a very good album. And it's always fun to bring out a couple of songs of that album,
Yeah.
So I still like it a lot.
Yeah. Then At the Edge of Time, I thought this was a really great album. I also love one of my favorite songs is A Voice in the Dark, a pretty very underrated song. So tell me about making this album.
Um, I think we regained maybe is the wrong word because I didn't think we lost too many fans with the previous one. But it has more of an old school approach, even though we were not necessarily aiming for this. It's just what happened. It is more kind of classical Blind Guardian with a modern touch, I would say. It has some of my all-time favorite Blind Guardian songs, like I absolutely love Wheel of Time, for example, or Sacred itself is still a killer song. There's lots of good stuff on that album.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite productions, sound-wise. I think many things just fell into place when we did that album.
Totally.
For example, I think it sounds much better to me, my personal taste, than Twist and the Myth, for example. That's the only thing I did not like that much about Twist. I'm not that happy with the production.
Yeah.
But Edge of Time, everything fell into place. And we did a huge tour for that. I think we were on the road for like 2.5 years or something. And there were some instant classics on that album, songs that we still play to this day on pretty much any show. Lots of epic stuff, as I was saying, Sacred and Wheel of Time. And it was the first time that we had the chance to work with a real orchestra, which was a giant step for us, because obviously we started experimenting with orchestra elements way in the past. I mean, on Somewhere Far Beyond, there's Theater of Pain has orchestra elements, but back then we obviously couldn't afford an orchestra, so it was all programmed keyboards. But there we could work with the real orchestra, and it just sounds different. So that was another big step. Lots of big steps for us.
Yeah. Then we get to almost there. We got Beyond the Red Mirror. I thought this was one of my favorite albums from 2015. Hard to believe it's almost 10 years old. And that was sort of like my introduction to Blind Guardian. And I know there's like the 5-year gap because I know you also did Cybrid with Fredericks. So what was sort of like the reason between like the 5-year gap?
We were on the road for so long. As I was pointing out before, we don't write new songs while we're on tour. So we put out an album, we hit the road, we stay on the road for 2 or 2.5 years, and only then we start working on new songs. So usually songwriting takes like a year, and then once we're done, we enter the studio, and recording and mixing everything might again take a year. So with 2 years on the road, 1 year writing, 1 year recording and mixing, there you go, 4 years are gone.
Yeah.
And it's not that we take this time for granted or do this on purpose. It's not that we have in the back of our minds, we released an album, so we have 4 years. We would love to be faster, but we simply are not, because we just can't write on the road, as I was pointing out before. So we need this. We need to get the tour behind us to be open for new ideas that don't just repeat what we've played on the road all day long.
Yeah. And then, of course, your latest album, The God Machine. I like this. I thought this was a good full band follow up to Beyond the Mirror. I know you obviously had that orchestral album, which I thought was great. So, what was the thought process going into making The God Machine? Because this was definitely one of my favorite albums from 2022.
I mean, obviously that was the whole process, when the pandemic hit and the world, especially the world for musicians, started to stand still, and you couldn't tour anymore, you couldn't play gigs, you didn't know what would happen next, and for us, we were in a lucky position because we didn't have a tour scheduled when the pandemic hit, so we didn't have to cancel a tour like many other bands. So we were sitting at home and we could focus on writing new songs. And the funny thing is, it was not planned to be like this in the beginning. When we start working on new songs, there's no master plan. It's not that we write down, oh, we need like 5 fast songs and we need a ballad and we need this and that. You just start writing and see what happens.
Yeah.
And this album, a lot of people called it back to the roots, which I disagree, because it does not sound like an old school Blind Guardian song to me, album to me. It does not sound like Summer Far Beyond, for example.
It
It
sounds
is
like very
as
modern and refreshing.
exactly. It is very aggressive. It is very fast. It actually has. There are two songs on the album that are the fastest songs that we've ever written. And but it still sounds like a modern Blind Guardian album. It doesn't sound like we're going back to the 90s or to whenever. It sounds like Blind Guardian in 2020. When did it come out? 22, whenever.
Yeah, 2 years
You know,
ago.
it yeah, it to me it shows exactly what we are about today. We obviously were in the mood for fast, aggressive songs again, and we're playing a lot of them live, and it's just fun. And I remember um we did something that we normally don't do. We played a song live before it was even recorded. When we did this Wacken worldwide pandemic live stream thing where some bands played a whole Wacken set. And we were one of those bands, and we played the song Violent Shadows. So we showed it to the world before we even properly recorded it. We just had a demo version recorded by that time. And the reactions were pretty overwhelming because again, people didn't expect this to happen. I don't know what they expected. Maybe something more like Beyond the Red Mirror, that style, more down-tuned 7-string things, more. I don't know what they expected, but apparently they did not expect this thrashy, old school aggression vibe, whatever it is. But
Yeah.
the super positive reactions obviously were a good sign for us that we're on the right track.
Yeah.
And when we put out the album and we saw the reviews coming in, they were overwhelming. Everybody loved it. Everybody was like, "Well, that's one of the best albums."
Yeah.
So we're happy. And it's the same thing. I mean, obviously we're touring for the album right now. And whenever we play songs from that album, the reactions are amazing. So we're super happy with that.
Yeah, and yeah, this is like I believe your guys' 10th album now, especially with putting out so many albums. How hard is it to like put a set list together when playing live?
It's a nightmare. The problem is obviously, when you go on tour to promote a new album, you obviously want to play some new songs. So I think in the moment we're playing 4 songs of the God Machine. Then there are a couple of songs that you have to play because people just want to hear those
Like
songs.
Bard Song, Valhalla, etc.
For example. And with more and more albums, that means more and more songs become those classic songs that people want to hear. So at some point, it's like either we have to play very, very long sets, or we have to, skip some songs because you also want to play some songs that you might have never played so far or that you haven't played in like ages. So it's tricky, and the solution for us is we prepare more songs than we actually play. I think the average amount of songs we play per night is like 16 or 18 songs or something. And I think we prepared at the moment 30, 35. I'm not even sure, but we can change the set list around a bit every night. And like this, we can squeeze in more songs. The positive thing is it stays way more interesting for ourselves because if you play the same set every single day for like 2 years, it becomes a boring routine, and we don't want that to happen. And also, a lot of fans come to more than one show, and like this, they have a guarantee to see at least partially different sets. Obviously, we don't play completely different 18 songs every day. We can't do that, but there's a fixed set of songs that stays in the set for every show, but there are positions in the set that we can play around with. And that's how it works for us.
Yeah.
Like this, we can squeeze in more songs. We can play the classics, but we can also play some other songs.
Yeah.
And it seems to work.
Yeah, and talking about playing live, because was seeing you guys live because I saw you all twice on the 70,000 Tons of Metal cruise, and I'm actually gonna see you in Atlanta in a couple weeks. How different of a mind frame is it to like playing live versus like recording? Is there any differences or similarities between the two?
It's very different. Recording can be a very intimidating thing because you're under the microscope. You know, everything, every single note you're playing is under the microscope. Everything is analyzed. Everything should be as perfect as possible. And, you know, live is the opposite. Live, you go on stage and you have one chance. You might blow it if you're not prepared, but you know, we try to be well prepared, but you just go for the moment. And you never know what will happen. You know, a perfect show happens when there's a feedback of energy between the band and the audience. You know, we go on stage, we give our energy into the audience, and if the audience fires back, it gets higher and higher, and that's the result is a very special show, a great night.
Yeah.
And as I was saying, studio is different. You know, it's much more tense. It's I like both because it's a great thing, you know, if you write a song and then you start recording it and you see how it grows step by step, you know, when you start normally with the drums and then you add bass and guitars and the layers of everything. You see how the song grows. That's great. But in the end, I prefer live because that's the ultimate feedback. You go on stage, you play the song, and you see the immediate feedback by the crowd. You see if they go wild or if they don't like a song, you would see that as well. Thank God we don't see that very much.
Yeah.
But that's the ultimate thing for me, being on the road and doing this.
Yeah. And being as it has been 2 years since the God Machine, have you all started ideas for the next Blind Guardian album? Like, what's the status with that, if you're allowed to say?
We didn't start working on that yet. As I was saying, we're on the road now. The tour will end sometime at the end of this year, and that's when we start working on new songs. Because everything we would do now would more or less sound like if we started composing now, it would more or less sound like the stuff we're playing every night.
Yeah.
So we first need to clear our heads, and then we start writing.
Yeah, but do you ever like have like ideas for songs?
You have ideas, obviously. I mean, if you're sitting at home and you know, we're rehearsing, we're preparing for the tour. So you grab a guitar and you warm up and you jam on some ideas and you have ideas. You know, you might play a riff and think, oh, that sounds cool. So you record it and save it for later. So you have a pile of ideas that you can build upon, but there are no fixed songs. It's not that I have a half-written song somewhere on my hard disk right now. I have ideas, I have riffs, melodies, Hansi might have lyrics or whatever. And obviously you can build upon those ideas that you gather during the time, but the proper writing only starts after the tour.
Right. All right. So thank you, Marcus, for this conversation. It's great to be able to finally have Blind Guardian on my show and learn about the band. Is there just anything else with Blind Guardian that you would like to plug? I'm looking forward to seeing you on the tour with Night Demon in a few weeks. It'll be my third time seeing Blind Guardian. Is there just anything else with Blind Guardian that you'd like to plug if you're able to?
Yeah, we're super looking forward to coming back to the US. I mean, obviously we've been on the 70,000 tons of metal cruise earlier this year. But technically speaking, it was not gigs in the US because it was on the open sea. So um, last US tour has been like 8 years ago. So it was a long time thanks to the stupid pandemic. But yeah, we're going to be back with Night Demon, as you mentioned. So we're super stoked about that package. It will be a lot of fun. In the moment, we're in Scandinavia. So we play Gothenburg tonight, still Stockholm and we're gigging Oslo. Then we're doing 4 shows in Ireland and the UK. And then we have exactly one day to do our laundry before we fly to the US. So we're almost there. So
Yeah.
I hope to see all of you and let's have a good time.
Awesome. So everybody, Marcus from Blind Guardian, see you next time.